Good afternoon, and welcome to the Thursday, September 12th meeting of the Energy and Environmental Conservation Committee. I'm Cynette Cavaliere, the chair, and as our tradition, I'm going to have us go around and introduce the people that are on our committee, and I'm going to start with you today, Kevin.
Okay. I'm Kevin Barry. I'm the Town Board Liaison.
I'm Sarah Waterman. I'm the Town Staff Liaison for the Engineering Department.
Matt Prinzing, Town Staff Liaison for the Planning Department.
Katie Rygg, Committee Member and Resident.
Roy Green, Committee Member and Resident.
Pat Schichler, Committee Member, Resident.
Cheremeteff, Committee Member and Resident.
Stephen Daly, Committee Member and Resident.
Okay, thank you. The first item on our agenda is the review and approval of minutes from the August 8th meeting. Can I have a motion for the approval?
I move approval of the minutes for the August 8th meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Okay, in that case, can we have a vote for approval? All those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good, okay. The next thing is the standing report from the Monroe County Environmental Management Council, and as I said last month, we are still on the hiatus for the summer. However, our next meeting is next week, and it is what we call the roundtable meeting. I can go. I think the last time I had suggested that there may have been a chance that I could not go, but I can go. But anybody else is welcome as well. If you wanted to go, I would certainly make sure that you were welcome. The roundtable meeting is where we'll go around and introduce ourselves to each other, as well as provide a little bit of information on what's going on in our municipalities. So I have the opportunity to really kind of key in on some things that we believe are most important. Planning on talking about our success in getting the public tree law completed, a bit on the EPOD and a bit on the Res Code. Are there any other topics that you guys would like me to include in my comments? Okay, and I know Sarah, you and Matt also have an additional opportunity this week or next week if you do think of something you want me to talk about.
We can do that.
The town board just approved ARPA funds to work on an active transportation plan, which I was really excited to hear. That might be worth sharing, because I think that's relatively unique in this region. Is that true? Working on an active transportation plan?
What kind of transportation plan?
Active transportation plan?
I wouldn't say that it's completely unique, but that we are one of the towns that really needs it more at this point. And the larger towns like us do move in that direction, but it's not, I don't think there's any others going on at this time.
Okay, that's cool. Anything else?
And to be clear, those are funds for the budget for next year. Or for implementation next year.
Development of a plan, as in the
Development of an active transportation plan.
Okay, which includes implementation of that plan or just the development of the plan?
The funds are for the development of the plan.
Okay, that's what I had. Okay.
What makes it active transportation? Like,
Walk, bike, public transit connectivity, making it easier to get around Penfield and connect to neighboring communities. Not in a car.
Through public means, okay.
Yeah. So
Does public transportation count? Or is it really just about?
It's active, you mean, like physically?
So it's, yeah, it's like
Walking and
physically
biking.
active. So it's
Okay.
more so like walking, biking,
Yeah.
those kinds of things.
It's all of those then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. At this point, we'll transition to the review of our required items. So the first one is town development projects.
At this time, there are none for our review.
Okay. Requests from the town board.
At this time, there are no new requests from the town board.
And then the third category is the clean energy community actions.
The biggest item that we're currently working on, it continues to be the community campaigns with Color Penfield Green. I can provide an update that on the classes that are coming up in October, but also that we're preparing for the next round of classes as well, and some additional education efforts to notify residents about those classes going on.
Okay. And I think the last month you had given us the information that you had applied for grants. I was at a meeting today, and there was a couple reps from the DEC and said, we're in the process of scoring the applications. And I wanted to lean over and say, pick us, pick us.
Oh, are you talking about the consolidated funding application grants?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I withheld. Okay, we get to move on to old business. The first one on our agenda is the public tree law.
So Matt actually sent out an email yesterday to the committee members, including comments from a resident. So we generally don't read those into record, and the public hearing has already happened for the public tree law. So you're aware those comments did come in, and we're sharing that publicly. Subsequent, prior to that, the town board actually already adopted the public tree law. So they did take the committee's recommendation to adopt that as written. And that's moved forward. We haven't received documentation from the state that was approved yet, so technically it's not enacted yet, but that should be coming in the next few weeks.
What happens after it's enacted?
Then it's actually part of our code, officially, and it's enforceable.
Do we put anything on our website to let people know that it exists or passed or?
That's a good question.
So to give you an idea of how it looks for ECode 360, again, it's not in this new law section because it hasn't been accepted by the state yet, but any new laws live here temporarily. So there are some laws that have been passed earlier in February of this year, and typically when the town does an update on ECode 360 for all of its new laws, they do it in batches. So it may be, I'm not entirely sure, it's the clerk's office that kind of coordinates updates to ECode 360, but once they are all updated, then they'll be embedded into the code exactly how they were adopted. I don't believe that anything is posted directly onto the website, like the town's website, but it is noted in the new laws section of ECode 360.
And what is ECode 360 for the group here?
That's essentially where people go to look at the town code.
It's a town site?
So it's not managed by the town, it's managed by technically the ECode 360 group. So if you want to look at Brighton's town code, you would look at it through ECode 360, or really any other towns in this area.
Very large quantity of towns use it.
Yeah.
It's basically the application that manages codes for.
It's like a nonprofit or something, or?
I'm not aware.
Yeah.
But that does bring up a good point. It would be reasonable to talk to our communications director about having some kind of news article to notify residents that this has been adopted and will be part of the code. So I can check on that with him.
Yeah, because it sounds like unless people were regularly checking this, E-code 360, that, and then they would only see it while it was a point before it's been incorporated.
Yep.
And I think it would fit with our talking about different communications to residents. I know for new building applicants, they would now get this information, I assume, when they're submitting. In other words, what part of the tree code might apply to them, or?
So the public tree law doesn't actually apply, it primarily is there for public trees, which,
Right, okay.
and for the town of Penfield are for public trees that
Okay.
Penfield technically owns. So
Okay.
trees in the state right of way or trees in the county right of way are not Town of Penfield's
Okay.
public trees. Like, we don't have any control over them. A developer generally isn't affecting
Okay.
Town of Penfield public trees. But if someone had a concern about a tree being taken down, they could go to the town code and see what the regulations are around that. My thought process is with a news article on the town website, then that gives a little bit more publicity to the town adopting this code. If people have questions regarding trees, or in specifically public trees, then they would have a better understanding of where they could go to get information.
And you could use it as an opportunity to explain a little bit about what's included and excluded from the
Yeah.
code. To avoid some confusion.
Yeah.
And how it fits in with Tree City USA goals and
Yep.
and the timeline for the forestry plan, perhaps?
It's such a perfect segue, because now that we have a public tree law, what's next in our process to become a Tree City USA?
So technically, we have a tree board or department. We now have a community tree ordinance. We can submit documentation that we're spending at least $2 per capita on urban forestry, which we're meeting that requirement. And then we've also already this year celebrated an Arbor Day celebration. So in December, the application opens for Tree City USA. Isn't it
December 1st is due.
Sorry.
Yeah.
December 1st, it is due, so we can start working on the application for that. And by we, I mean staff will start working on the application for that.
Do you need anything from our group?
No, I think in terms of documenting the celebration of Arbor Day, it's going to be, working with the website and PCTV to have any documentation showing.
Oh, we already have that.
Well, right, but yeah, any of those materials would come from in the staff. And
Really the only open items are the budget written out for so that it's clear where the money is going towards urban forestry, and then the actual application. This committee has already done a lot of the legwork for the Arbor Day celebration, and as we were doing that, we saved the different documentation on our town website and photos, those kinds of things, so that we would have that to submit for the application.
How difficult will it be for your budgetary parts showing the amount spending on forestry?
It's nothing crazy.
yeah, no.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what?
It's nothing crazy. It's pretty
Okay.
simple.
Yeah.
It's just we have to put the time in, and it's not like going to take months, if that makes sense.
So when you submit an application, as long as the documentation for those aspects is all lined up and acceptable, it's pretty much,
Accepted.
We get
That's
it.
my understanding.
Okay.
Yeah. So as long as you meet the requirements, then it's accepted. If there's a question on can you provide another document for Arbor Day celebration or this or that, then they can request that and then go through
okay.
that review process.
And it's due December 1st.
Yes.
Do you have any ideas of how long the turnaround is for
don't.
them saying you're accepted? Okay.
We'll have a better idea next year.
Hopefully by
Ideally.
Arbor Day 2025,
Yeah.
because that would be fun to be able
And again,
to-
this would be something that would have to be renewed every year.
Yep.
So we'll have to
Okay.
celebrate Arbor Day again next year, document it, reapply before early December next year. And
verify the budget, same kind of thing.
Right.
To do that. Okay, then the one open item on the public tree law was the fact that we were really promoting for funding for a forestry plan. Are there-
Yes, so part of the resolution to approve the public tree law was for the town staff to start pursuing funding for that. So there's a grant application that opens every year. It's already passed for 2024, but that opens every year that the town can apply for, and that would probably be our next step.
When does that open?
Is there any way to tickle or remind the committee like a year from now to follow up with the town board, just to make sure that that process is moving along? Is there any mechanism we could put in place to be like,
It's usually her.
Generally,
It's me.
I would recommend to do what I do and put a reminder in your calendar.
Okay.
I'm your
There's
little-
not like a formal mechanism.
And the human tickler file is, no, I am, because what is the email I just sent out? Whatever happened to this thing we did in July?
I guess maybe a little bit later in the year, last year, we wrote a progress document just to kind of set certain goals for the year ahead. Maybe we, update that and put review of funding for forestry plan in there, and continue to review that as time goes on and make sure that we're making those progress, or making progress on the progress document.
So,
And it would be reasonable that engineering and planning consider alternate funding if a grant is not received. So
Yeah.
similar to we've already started the budget process for 2025 for the town. As Katie mentioned, the active transportation plan is being funded for next year at this point by the ARPA funds. But prior to getting that approval from the town board, the engineering and planning department already started trying to allocate funds towards that. It was less than the $100,000 because we have a limited budget. But realistically, having the $100,000 means that we'll get there faster. So generally, if we're looking for grants for different funding, they're either in addition to funding we're putting in the budget, or they're grants for larger funding than we have in the budget. So it'd be appropriate for us to start, either make that suggestion that the town board consider funding putting budget money towards the forestry plan next year,
so
towards the budget for
26?
2026, sorry, to be clear. Just because the budget's already moving forward, and right now, the engineering and planning department and that budget are looking at, again, the active transportation plan as well as a climate action plan. So I don't see how a forestry plan would fit into that budget for 2025.
But so just trying to figure out, will you do research on how much it takes to create a forestry plan?
I
so
have an
that
idea if you guys need help. Yeah.
Say that again,
it's-
sorry.
Say it again?
I have an idea, so we do these, and roughly for a small one, it's about 100,000, because you have to start with a tree survey, unless there's an existing tree survey for the town.
There's not.
And then it kind of builds from there. And then there's training involved, and for the people that are going to be running the forestry program in the town.
How do you identify small? Because you started out for a small something.
So this is about 500 trees.
Oh.
500 to 800. So this is a larger community,
Yes.
so there's going
Yes.
to be a larger input. And for something like this, for the tree survey, either you can do an overall tree survey with drone footage, or you can do boots on the ground with actual people measuring trees, but that just takes longer. So I think having the EPOD and the tree plan now, that will help feed into the community urban forestry plan, so.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
good. Good to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I can help with that down the road.
So when does that grant opportunity open up?
I can't remember the date right now. This year, can't remember. Actually, this year I don't think we applied for funds for that one. Last year we applied for funds for tree plantings. So you can either apply for funds for a forestry plan or for tree plantings or tree reforestation, that kind of thing. So I'd have to look, but I don't even think it's posted right now.
Who is it through?
The DEC.
DC, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the
I think it was
Community and
April last year.
Urban Forestry Department, I think.
Yeah, they have specific requirements and a whole methodology, and
So it sounds like you need an activities calendar where it's like there's certain dates where things open up. You need to figure out when to start and when it needs to be in by. and-
Oh, that's part of my calendar.
Yeah,
I don't.
Make
have
it public,
that.
yeah.
Are there any other unique sorts of grants out there that would go to that? I mean, it sounds like quite a bit is needed, and unless one of these grants opens up the first ability to start proceeding with the forestry plan is 2026.
Even with a grant, probably 2026 is the soonest.
Okay. Well, anyways,
Because
back to
just-
unique grants, I don't know if you know.
I'm not aware of any at this time. That's the
Okay.
only one I am aware of.
So
Yeah.
it could be that instead of considering just forestry-related grants, we look at public planning or public works-related grants. But yeah, trying to look at it other angles and other resources rather than strictly a forestry-related grant.
And that's not to say that grants is the only way that this, like, I'm trying to be clear, grants is not the only way this moves forward.
Sure.
Like, at
Right.
some point, the town allocates money towards it as well.
Yeah, I was just wondering if a separate, I know that you said the budget's already set for 2025 when they have the other areas of work that they're doing, and it wouldn't be till 2026. but
For implementation, yeah.
I naively thought, oh, maybe a grant would come in sooner, but apparently not.
Most of the time, so like, the last time we applied for this grant, but for a different item, normally, I think I applied in the late winter, early spring, and we found out over the summer for the answer. So like, I think it's normally like a 3 to 6 month turnaround. Similar to like the consolidated funding application, we applied in June, and we should find out in December, January.
Okay. Anything else on that?
Real quick, Matt or Sarah, as far as following up with that one person who submitted belated public comment, are we going to inform that person that the law's been
They've-
passed?
Sorry, yes, so we already have. We did reach out to that resident. We let them know that although we do appreciate their comments, the public tree law has been adopted, as well as the public hearings have closed, so comments are not formally being accepted at this point. We did, however, let them also know that we did share the comments with this committee, so that realistically, especially for the EPOD code, you can have those in the back of your mind as appropriate.
Great, thank you.
And I suspect we all will, so. Okay, anything else on the public tree law? Good. Okay, moving on to that EPOD code.
So Matt's going to bring up the draft document with the comments or responses, and we'll go through the different comments on the right-hand side. We're not going through each individual response in red, just those comments on the side at this time. Sorry, can you zoom in, please?
Sure.
You understood that. That was great.
I did get there, yeah.
Yeah, so the first two are just from Pat and Stephen, just clarifying that they're in support as written for the staff responses. Then moving down to this section on omissions, the cumulative impact assessment. Stephen comments, what about the omission of consideration of cumulative impacts? Sarah replied, there are no current regulations within the town code to address cumulative impact in the context of woodland or steep slope EPODs, but there are mechanisms within the other EPODs through state and federal regulations. Then I follow that with, while the 2023 comprehensive plan does not explicitly cite the cumulative impacts of land use changes and development, it does provide a community profile in Appendix A, which is intended to be used by local decision makers to understand the consequences of future actions and development. The community profile addresses the following topics: population characteristics, housing characteristics, economic base, community resources, transportation system, natural resources, land use patterns, and sustainability. And we got a thumbs up by Stephen. Thanks, yeah. Any further comments on that, or do we feel that between the context of mechanisms at the state and federal level, and then also the incorporation of community profiles in our comprehensive plan, do we feel that they're not omitted, they are just maybe not noted specifically in the EPOD code?
So what does it mean by decision makers?
The town board, planning board.
Those are boards having jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And do they often refer back to that appendix
Ideally.
in practice?
I obviously can't, I mean, I can't speak to that as I can't tell,
Yeah.
like, I can't say how these board members are making their decisions. But it's my understanding that part of their directive is to refer to the comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
I think the comprehensive plan is probably a major resource that we do use. We never confer on how often we're using it, but we make mention of it amongst each other, so we're obviously referring back to it.
I can also share that as staff makes recommendations to the different boards or provides project review committee questions, the comprehensive plan is in consideration for those recommendations.
And so what does that appendix actually show?
Let me pull it up.
Do you have easy access to it?
Somewhat.
Okay.
Or, let me see, did I have a link? No. All right. Yeah, just.
I think my comment speaks to this a little bit, the next one down as well.
While that loads, do you want to scroll down so we can start reading his next comment? So Roy put in the comment, and I'll read through it as Matt gets the comprehensive plan up. Roy noted, I agree with both the sentiment and this comment and the town's response. Environmental protection is the definition of EPOD. In the definition of EPOD is a bit misleading. There is no protection of these areas, just additional review and permitting requirements. EPODs are not protected areas. I do think the loss of woodland areas over time has likely been occurring, even when following the permitting and review requirements specified in EPOD districts. I think the town forestry plan, if and when completed, could be used to inform master planning and potential zoning changes to actually provide areas that could be preserved over time. And for information, I do agree that the forestry plan can be a helpful document in that. I will reaffirm, as I probably have the entire time we've been going through the EPOD
It's not
code.
code.
No, that is not code, that is a plan, just as we don't generally put goals in, like we don't codify goals. We have to be careful in how the EPOD code is being written, because as it stands right now, our EPOD code can be considered a taking. And what that means for anyone that is not aware is basically if, say, Kevin owns a piece of property and the town limits the use of that property so very much that he can't do anything with it, then the town is basically taking his rights away or taking the value of his property away. So as we've been going through the EPOD code, we continue to refer back to the town attorney who brought that to our attention in the first place, so that the code does not become a taking. With that, sorry.
I was gonna say, did the town attorney explain if that's a litigation that has occurred that has brought about that concern versus what the code was from before? Because that code's been on the books for many years and would have been a taking for all those years, and now all of a sudden...
It is not my understanding. So first off, the town attorney has in the past couple years changed. So it is not the same person reviewing the same information. So that previously the town attorney had been the same attorney for like decades. So having that change, there is a fresh set of eyes on these different things. I have not been made aware if a formal litigation has taken place, but it was brought to our attention because of a concern with a developer.
A developer brought up a concern to the town attorney?
To the town staff, which was brought to the town attorney.
I can comment on this from being numerous years on former conservation committee. It was one of the first things that I learned is just because a parcel of land had an EPOD, whatever the EPOD be, did not preclude that there would be any sorts of disturbance of or building on. And regardless of the way the wording was taken in the previous code and wording, we operated such that, or at least the Conservation Committee, that we could not advise, don't do this because of this EPOD, so that regardless of the wording, the actual operation, that there was no taking. We just would try to say, well, could you do this instead, or, see that it met the mitigation of working within an EPOD was met. And that was, Roy, you're coming to that, it is exactly what hit me so many years ago.
I'm not coming to it. I know that's what it says.
Oh, you know, right.
Yeah,
But I'm
I
just
know.
saying, you're verbalizing that, and it's,
Well, I think it's important to put it on the record that this is really not an environmental protection overlay district. It just means there's additional permitting requirements to do what you need to do. But my other point about the taking, it was a taking in the previous code for all these number of years. So you've got this history of this code being in place. Now we're changing it based on a town attorney's opinion to change the code to be more friendly so it's not a taking. I'm just wondering what's driving that versus the opinion of the attorney versus
So my understanding
past
that
history.
there's a number of things that's driving that. It's not simply because the code is being considered a taking. It's also because the code needs to be enforceable and has not previously been enforced.
It hasn't been enforced because?
My understanding is that it was not conceived as enforceable or perceived as enforceable. On top of that, and I mean, you experienced that as you were going through different projects when EECC came together. And as you were going through different project sites, you were finding there were larger trees. We had never had a tree inventory done prior to EECC being created. That is new, even though technically that is part of our code right now. So I feel uncomfortable going into details of at some point in the town's history, things were done incorrectly. But they were, and part of the reason for updating the code is so that they can be done correctly. Part of it is for clarification. Part of it is for understanding the code and readability, and as well as enforceability.
part of what I was trying to say is that regardless of the way it was written, we were not doing a taking. It may sounded like we could, but that was not in reality occurring. However, what a big difference is that we would say, well, here's this EPOD and here's our suggestions, and then we would find that the next day, everything was clear cut, and that was what we were talking about. There was no, enforcement of what would we do when this happens. So, and I know we had comments on that about what happens after the fact.
And that's part of why, as we're going through these changes to the EPOD code, there is not enforcement in it, because the town and town staff do not have the authority to enforce fines or anything of that sort, whereas the courts do. But we don't get to assign the courts how they enforce it.
And there was no enforcement in the old code either.
There wasn't, and that's part of why it wasn't getting enforced.
So I guess the question that you're making me ask is, what value is there in an EPOD code other than to say you have a wooded area and here's all the loopholes on how you can develop there and chop down the trees?
I mean, I don't.
So to say that there's no protections, I think, is misleading.
I agree.
Because let's just use the prime example of the most recent application, or not the most recent. Why can't I think of it?
You're thinking Wellsbrook?
Wellsbrook. So the developer, if that wasn't a woodland EPOD, they could have clear cut it. They could have done no mitigation. They would have been able to remove every single tree on the property. And that is not how the town has allowed development in woodlot EPODs. They have required some buffering to remain afterwards. So to say that there's no protections, I don't think that's true. There is some protections, and there remains to be some protections in this new code. It's just that, and there's a lot, not only does the EPOD code require, you know, it makes sure that there aren't other adverse effects made to the land other than the removal of trees. You have to show that there's no adverse effects on drainage or to other neighboring properties. So, yeah, I would not say that there are no protections.
So in this new code, what are the protections for protecting the trees? What's the buffer requirements under this new code?
There's not explicit buffer requirements, but there are higher level of review, and they are required to show where those larger trees are on a site plan or on their landscape plan. And ultimately, they are, the review, they have to justify why the development has to occur in this particular area. And if the board having jurisdiction decides, well, if you can change your layout in order to preserve some of these large trees, could you do that? And so, again, whereas before we had, you know, the tree fund that you may need to, or there may be the penalty, the mitigation to replant trees, it wasn't being enforced because it was, those enforcements would have been devaluing the property and seen as a taking. And so everything is kind of cascaded to the board can suggest that those trees be preserved in some way by changing their site plan, but ultimately, because of the terms that we had before that would have required some sort of mitigation through replanting or paying into a town tree fund, it made it so it was considered a taking. So there's
So all that's gone?
It's gone, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that part's not in this
Okay.
draft.
Yeah. So I stand by my wording about no protection.
Because if you do a wetland,
'Cause there's nothing
you
that says
still
you can
have
save
to,
it.
you have to, if you take down a wetland,
You have to get DEC or Army Corps of Engineer permitting,
correct.
and
Yeah.
they're
But woodland
stringent
trees
in
don't
that.
have any protection of that nature. There's
It is
no-
not that form of protection, no. It is a
Unless it-
higher level of review for the project, and by requiring certain information that we're putting in the code as requirements to be provided in the application, that gives the space and the education to the Board of Jurisdiction to know what larger trees are on that site and know or have consideration of what can be preserved and what may be beneficial to have them place more trees or place more buffering or similar things like that.
And I would just add to, I mean, in conjunction with like seeker, like having an EPOD review at the town level plus seeker at the state level kind of promotes awareness so that, yes, they're not prohibiting these activities, but seeker will usually require consideration of mitigation measures as well. So I think in tandem, it is helpful to make sure that those wooded areas are being considered, and this makes sure it's definitely considered during the seeker process as well.
I agree with you completely.
Yeah, I guess my point is that, okay, there's a little bit more review, a little bit more permitting requirement. Yes, there is state requirements for wetlands, there are state requirements for, you know, state environmental quality review or whatever it is, seeker. But there is nothing that the town is doing to preserve these larger areas, and that's okay. This code is not designed to do that, but I'm saying if we wanted to do that, it needs to be somewhere probably outside of this code, maybe in a forestry plan, but it's not there. Maybe it goes in the master plan, but if these areas are not preserving, so it's a little bit misleading calling it environmental protection overlay district, because it's not protecting the environmental, not the trees anyway, specifically, woodland areas. It's not protecting them.
Yeah, the only way the trees would be protected is if there was a threatened or endangered plant or animal in that EPOD.
Yeah,
And that's because it's private land.
it's private land.
So where did the name Environmental Protection Overlay District, I mean, this is state, federal?
I don't even know if that started while I was alive.
Yeah.
Well, probably-
I
probably not,
cannot reasonably answer that question.
Okay. So, I mean, it's not something that we ourselves can say, oh, let's change the name to be more representative of what's really happening here.
I don't know if I see the value in changing the name.
I'm not suggesting that.
And I truthfully don't 100% agree with the statement that environmentally protected overlay district is not an accurate title. I don't entirely agree with that.
Yeah. I disagree with you, but that's
okay.
That's fine. I'm not even asking for any changes. I'm just saying that, I'm just pointing this out at this point. Like it's not doing what the title implies it's doing. That's what I'm pointing out.
Can you take a minute to explain how a citizen would be reassured that we really were in danger of taking, as opposed to responding to a developer who simply wanted to say, you're in danger of taking, to make it more friendly to developers?
I don't know if I understand the question. I'm sorry.
So basically, a developer came to the town and said, the way that you have this, it could be considered taking. Okay, so then there were certain things that occurred after that, and I'm sure there was something that was looked into to determine that, yes, indeed, we are, so we have to make some changes, as opposed to us just reacting and then making this code more friendly to developers when it didn't need to be, basically.
I mean,
know part of it would be the county or the town attorney.
I mean, to me, and I'm sorry for jumping in, but I mean, whether something is a regulatory taking or not is a very complicated analysis and is very fact intensive, and so it'll depend a lot on the property at issue. So I'm sure, I don't know what the town's attorney's opinion was, but I'm guessing, I mean, if there's a lot of factors to consider is what I would say. And one property might not be a taking, but another property could be a taking based on the circumstances. So I have no idea what these particular circumstances are, but I'm guessing there was some kind of complicated legal analysis that kind of supported ultimately the town attorney's opinion, because it is frankly not clear-cut what constitutes a taking.
And I would also go back to how Pat had mentioned that in the past, the EPOD code, when she was on conservation board, wasn't necessarily, like, again, we weren't doing tree surveys. It wasn't being entirely held to what the woodland EPOD code was stated. So while these recent changes are under the directive of the current town attorney, it could be that in the past it wasn't being as upheld as it should have been because the previous attorney did determine it to be a taking. And so while we're discussing these changes in the recent context of noticing and taking the recommendation of the current town attorney, I can't speak to any time prior to me being here, but it could have been that the decision was made years ago that it wasn't enforceable because it was determined to be a taking by the previous attorney. And so I don't know if we can really, pinpoint that it was one developer that said that this needs to be changed because it's considered a taking in this case, when for years it hasn't been enforceable and hasn't been enforced entirely to what the EPOD code, the Woodland EPOD code said. So I don't know if it's entirely accurate to say that it was a very direct route here when it hasn't been enforced for years.
Gotcha. So the reason I asked that question was because sitting here listening, if I was a citizen watching this tonight, that would have been my question.
Sure.
And I think that just got pretty much addressed. So.
And I think also to answer your question a little more, I think part of the consideration as a resident is to consider if you're looking at doing something on your property and it's the EPOD code is followed as it is right now, you are severely limited in what you can do within an EPOD. And this code, while yes, it will allow more people to do work in an EPOD or development or maintain their trees, it realistically makes your property as a resident more valuable to you.
And I don't think or making it more developer-friendly, I see it as you're talking about not having something written into a code that's not legal, as in a taking, or not enforceable, which, why have a code that is never going to be able to be enforced? And these words of a taking was not something that we ever used before. It was said, you can't do that, you can't tell them they absolutely can't build here.
But that was the code. That's what it just seems like, as a group, when we got formed, then you did your first project, and you all looked at it and go, well, this is the code, why aren't we enforcing the code?
Yes.
And now all of those are now gone.
Right, because, and I don't know if the contention that it was unenforceable is valid. Like, everybody keeps saying it was unenforceable, but it could have been enforced. We just chose not to.
And it would have been determined to be a taking in most cases.
And that was litigated where?
Or it would go to the town court, and we cannot require them to enforce it as the code is written.
We can't
with those
require them to do
consequences.
anything, but the town board could require things. But my point is, where was this litigated? It's just all of a sudden, this is a taking.
But the town attorney suggested that we modify the code to avoid litigation.
And to update it for clarity. Like, that is
Exactly.
not the only reason.
Yes.
To be
Right.
clear with
Yeah.
everyone,
Yeah.
both here and watching, this is not only being changed because of that. It's not only being reviewed because of that. And that's just like you're looking at more than just the woodland EPOD.
Right.
The other EPODs, most of them have never even been considered a taking. So, or that has never been brought to anyone's
And I think that's the
attention.
same thing. If
Like,
you live on
all
a
of
place
it.
that's wetlands, you already know that you can and cannot do certain things with them. And
But
if you
when you-
live with a steep slope, you know you can and cannot do things. So it's just so frustrating that if I have a wooded lot, that,
I wouldn't say that that is known across the board.
Okay.
Because I can tell you, I know people that have bought property both in this town and in other towns that have EPODs, specifically woodland and steep slope EPODs, that are not aware and are not required to be made aware that those are part of their purchase.
okay.
And I mean, I bought a property in a different town that has a woodland EPOD on it in that town, and I knew that it was there, but no one informed me it was there. I did the research myself so I would know it was there. Not everybody even knows that woodland EPODs exist. So I don't
That's
think that
fair.
it's reasonable to expect an everyday person that doesn't handle these things to just know that's on their property when they purchase it. Wetlands, my
Yes.
understanding is that the general public knows they exist. Floodplains, my understanding is the general public knows they exist. I also know that when you get a site survey, you are required to have that on it, and that you get when you purchase a property. So I think woodlands and steep slopes often fall in a slightly different category.
And there's been building on steep slopes, and you might say to yourself, well, I can't build here because it's so steep, but you can. We've had plenty of building with mitigation on steep slopes, so.
Yeah, and to your point about clarity, and there are some things that do need to be updated for sure, for clarity, I agree. I just think that what this thing is doing, the EPOD, the way it's been modified, to update it to address those concerns about taking or non-enforceability, which I disagree with, that cut out any of the real protections that were in the old code. That's my opinion.
Okay, that makes sense. With that opinion, for this document and for the EPOD code as written, do you have formal suggestions that you want the town board to consider?
So didn't they already vote on this one?
The EPOD,
EPODs, no.
no, that's why we're still reviewing
The
it.
public hearing is passed, but
Yeah.
And
but
no
they-
one spoke at the public hearing.
But they formally asked for this committee to respond to these questions brought forth.
Yeah, I'd have to think about it some more.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, I think the biggest one was, in my brain, is the identification of how an EPOD is determined, especially since it seems like if a stream goes through it and cuts it in half, then that eliminates the connection. You got 3 acres here and 2 acres here. It's now no longer 5 acres because it's split in half by an overview of something wide enough to turn it into 2. You know, and certain things like that just kind of seems like we should do a better job of trying to identify how we identify EPODs or woodlands in specific.
With the available data to us, we don't, unless you have someone going out and doing a tree inventory, which the town, I don't think reasonably can afford to do that for all of the trees in town. And I think there's limits to what we can do on private property. And I'm looking at you in case you would like to correct me.
No, you're correct.
Just because I know you have that knowledge. Unless the town's going to do that, or the town is going to pay for a flyover and analysis of that data, then we are in the situation that we're relying on the LiDAR data that's provided to us. And that LiDAR data is analyzed in a way that we can't include those rivers and connect those 2 groupings of trees in that example.
And if the definition that we've proposed is that contiguous 5 acres, contiguous? Contiguous, 5 acres of tree canopy coverage. And so, if that's the agreed upon terms that we're going with and ensuring that we can measure that through LiDAR and understanding that how we're able to measure just the tree canopy, not features below it. I think, because I've been working on updates to the woodland EPOD mapping based off of the recent LiDAR, and you are able to see where in areas the tree canopy does go over streams because it's able to span across, and you're able to distinguish the tree canopies more closely and measure them. The other thing that would come across in my year and a half being here is that if there is a modification to a woodland EPOD, say in the case with why do I keep forgetting the name, the development Wellsbrook. I can't arbitrarily redraw that line of where the EPOD is and isn't, because I don't have any data to show where the tree canopy is moved unless more LiDAR data is shown. And so if the town adopts this approach of using LiDAR data going forward to measure the tree canopy, it's not up for some subjective view of the aerial photography or somebody's drive-by of what it appears to be continuous tree canopy cover. It's simply based off of the raw LiDAR data and what we can measure. And so I feel like that is where it's going to be a more effective mapping of the town's woodland areas.
And so with all of that, although I understand the frustration that technically the way it is written in this draft code does not allow for those connections over streams where the tree canopy does not actually connect, and that can separate different groupings of trees that would potentially create an EPOD, part of a designated EPOD. I understand the frustration with that, but we do not have, at this time, either the funding or the ability to do it differently than that.
So I had a little bit of thinking while you were talking through that.
Please.
It'd be really nice to understand the town attorney's opinion, legal opinion, on the problems with the EPOD code related to takings and/or related to unenforceability that would help me draft or be able to consider what we could potentially do in the new code. Is that something we could obtain? It's been referenced several times about the town
And
attorney
he's
said
acknowledged
this.
it at the town board meeting as well when this
Right.
came up. It's a question we can ask. I don't know if it would be considered best practice for the town attorney to publicly say, why they think that our code is poor.
They don't have to
So
say
I could see hesitance in that.
They don't have to say it's poor, they can just say the concerns.
Can we also, is there an opportunity for us to compare to other municipalities who have successfully perhaps struggled with the same, like, did you do any looking to see who has woodland EPOD?
woodland EPOD?
Yes.
There's not a lot.
I know Arundecoit has wood lot, but that didn't seem quite the same to me because of the use of the word lot versus land. Just, it sounded more.
I would tell you that we actually internally use woodland and woodlot EPOD interchangeably in our conversations. So I don't think it's that different. From looking at, and I don't remember the last time you looked at it, but from looking at the Parma woodland EPOD and the Arundecoit woodland EPOD, my memory of them is not that their codes are not as detailed as ours currently is.
And if they were doing a review of just our code, it wouldn't tell them whether or not it's actually being enforced.
Yes.
Right.
So
We do agree
just-
that we want it enforceable because that was frustrating.
Right, I
And
guess
we
I'm
want
just
it
saying that
enforced.
even
Yes,
if we
and
looked
we
at
want it
other
enforced.
codes and saw, oh, it is really similar to our code, it wouldn't actually tell us whether or not they're enforcing it. So I understand like your question of like, have we actually spoken with other municipalities to find whether or not they're struggling with enforcing it? Because it's one thing to just compare codes, something entirely different to see whether it's not effectively protecting their woodlands, so.
Roy, are you looking for the town attorney to lay out his thought processes and justify why, the basis of his legal opinion? Because I think we go to somebody that's an attorney for their legal opinion. It's almost like we're trying to second guess his legal opinion.
No, I'm not trying to second guess, I'm trying to
Okay.
understand why it's not enforceable, so we can figure out how to make it enforceable. Because right now, it still may not be enforceable.
I mean, one of the concerns, I think, if I was a town attorney, was that if he or she was to share their opinion, then it would no longer be privileged.
Yeah.
And so there would be a question as to, how broad that waiver of privilege would be. And so I suspect that the town attorney would not feel comfortable
Right,
doing so.
So if they shared it at a public town hearing, though,
They
Well,
shared that they felt it was a taking.
But not the underlying legal analysis.
Right.
why it was a
And that's
taking,
what I'm
yeah.
talking about, to
Yeah,
go
which
through.
is-
I would
Which
not.
I would,
Thank you.
as a lawyer, I would work really hard to make sure that wasn't publicly disclosed. And there's a lot of reasons why that could be risky for the town to disclose that, because then it's basically provide some kind of blueprint that could be used to basically argue that something's a taking against the town, which could be really dangerous. So I hear your concern, though. I think it's, I think with this EPOD code in general, we're running into this issue of what's a taking and what's not, and that is dictating some of what we're doing.
but
I'm
it's
just
beyond
thinking of
that.
some other way to like.
There's other things that are not enforceable, apparently. It's not just about the taking or not taking.
Right.
So what are those things that we can address?
Yeah, I mean, because I don't think we felt it was unreasonable to ask for a tree inventory.
Right, we didn't
Do you-
feel that was unreasonable.
How much is a tree, does anyone have an idea how much a tree inventory costs for like a 6 to 10 acre property that's full of trees?
Right, we,
So like, at some
I can
point,
figure that out.
at some point, anything that we're asking is going to cost someone money.
Yeah.
And maybe my biggest concern, because I come from this background and this perspective, is if I'm a resident in this town, how is that going to affect me? Because there's a lot of residents that have EPOD on their property. And from the ones that have come forward to the engineering department asking for information or what they can do within that EPOD, a lot of them have been really frustrated because they haven't been able to put a shed at the edge of their EPOD or slightly overlapping, because they haven't been allowed to clear trees in their backyard so they can have a larger backyard, and they weren't aware when they purchased the property that there was a woodland EPOD on it.
So apparently, I don't understand why that would be the case, because you can apparently clear cut an area inside the EPOD, and that's perfectly fine.
If it's only, the 10% was there, or.
Right.
Yes,
Or mitigation, and that's
Or
what
you-
we're saying.
or mitigation,
like,
but they're looking at it of, well, I can't afford it, or I don't want that mitigation. And that's where residents in my time here have been getting frustrated.
Okay.
So like I also come from it with that perspective of the residents coming forth being frustrated. I also see it from the developer side of how much more money am I going to have to spend to do a tree inventory?
Which is going to go towards the people purchasing, and we're talking about affordable housing as it is.
So truthfully, I purchased a property with a woodland EPOD on it with the desire to not do anything to it. I have a fox den in my backyard and I'm happy to have that. But I don't expect other people to do that.
But if you were to sell that property to somebody else, you would
Oh,
not
they might
expect them
actually,
to.
they might do that, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But it would be theirs and I would, in my opinion, would have no say over it at that
Yes.
point.
Okay.
So like it,
As the chair, I just have to say, at this point, we're running very close on time for our meeting and agenda, so what do we do next?
so again, I can ask the town attorney if he's comfortable in providing some information on why he feels that as the EPOD code is written, it's a taking.
Or I think the other thing is, is there any other clauses in here that also feel non-enforceable, or just so we know that it's...
As we've updated it?
Yes.
I mean, as we have updated it, I'm not aware of any concerns with it.
Okay.
Because he didn't bring any back.
No.
Right,
He's
so we
comfortable
should
with
be
it as
good.
written. With that, I know that the town board, because the public hearing had no comments, and because we've been trying to go through these responses for multiple meetings, are looking for the responses from this committee. Now, that is not to say the responses have to be completed at this meeting. My first choice would be to ideally get through this document and have the committee either decide, yes, we're ready to send this on, or no, we want to have further review of the EPOD, the draft EPOD code. Does that sound reasonable? Unless you think that we just need further review to begin with and there's no value in going through these comments as is right now.
There's only a few comments left. You must just go through them.
That's what I thought.
I'm fine, I'm good with that. Let's finish the other code, we know which ones we're concerned about, let's finish the rest of them.
Okay. So the next one is, Steve wrote, has the town attorney weighed in on this issue? It's not clear based on the responses written. And this is to the, sorry.
Increasing buffer zones around wetlands and streams identified by the New York State DEC. So essentially taking what the DEC has already shown and regulates as those buffer zones. If the town were to increase those buffer zones anymore, it would be increasing the scale of the wetland or stream EPODs. And so instead of it being the state mandating what those boundaries are, the town is now increasing it. I'm not sure if the town would have any sort of justification for making it larger other than to just make them larger when the DEC already says that this is what the scale is for a check zone. And so, yeah, with that understanding, the town attorney,
The town attorney has reviewed this.
Right.
And originally, they did interpret it as if we were to make further requirements in that regard, a taking.
Right.
Yeah, that explanation's fine with me. It's just,
Okay.
as it was written, it said increasing them may be interpreted as a taking by the town attorney.
Sure.
Which suggested that we were guessing what the town attorney might say.
So I guess in terms of our response, I should modify it to say that it would be determined rather than maybe.
Right,
Okay.
the town attorney
So-
has made that determination. Yeah.
He's determined that it may be interpreted as a taking.
Yeah,
To
understood.
be clear, like, I think we just need to flip some of the wording in that sentence.
Yes.
So to be clear, he has not determined it is a taking. He has determined it may be a taking, and that again refers to Steve's previous comment of, depending on the lot of land or the parcel, it can change.
I mean, it makes sense. The buffers exist and are enforceable by the DEC. Why are we going to increase them? So it's one of those, yeah, I get it. He's being risk averse
Was
to
it just
avoid
for ease
litigation.
of measurement, or do we know why it was a larger number?
I can't speak to how the DC determines their buffer zone.
No, I just meant where the comment to increase the buffer zone, where did that come from?
Oh, one of the town board members.
Oh, okay. It was a recommendation that, okay, I understand that. Thank you.
Yep.
I was-
So the wording in black are recommendations, black ink
The
are-
wording in black are the comments and/or questions by the town board member.
Okay, just to refresh.
And the red responses are responses
Staff.
by staff.
Okay, just to refresh, all right.
Because generally when there's a large number of comments like this, staff will put together responses on behalf of the committee and provide it to the committee for review.
It's
So that the
appreciated.
committee can say, no, we disagree with that, yes, we agree
Okay.
with that, please make these changes, those kinds of things.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there further comments, Matt?
That was the last one there.
Not from
Okay.
us.
So then, for next steps on this letter, so these responses to begin with, what we need as staff members from the committee is, do you support these comments? Do you not support these comments? Do you have alterations to these comments? Anything in that world?
One question, and it goes back to your concerns, Roy, which is, you know, there's kind of this black and white determination that's been made at this point that, like, mitigation measures in this example would be determined to be a taking. I mean, one thing we could ask the town, and ultimately the town's attorney, would be, what are a range of options that we could consider that would fall outside of it being deemed a potential taking? So that's the only thing I would say is, maybe if there was a range of alternatives to address the taking issue as to opposed to just kind of striking the language or whatever the approach was. That's one way to try to address your concern, Roy.
Yeah, and I'd also ask that they define what they mean by a taking. There might be a standard definition somewhere, but what definition is the town attorney using?
Stephen, do you know if there's a legal definition for a taking? Isn't that what it is? Like, it's a legal definition?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a regulatory taking, which is
Yeah.
as opposed to like a physical taking. Like if the government puts a something on your property, that's a physical taking, they owe you money. If you have, there's a regulatory taking, and the analysis for regulatory taking, I'm sorry, I don't have this off the top of my head.
Okay.
But the most critical aspect is that you have like no viable economic use of your property anymore, but there's all kinds of exceptions to that, and there's a balancing test. So I'm guessing the town attorney may be able to refer to some kind of definition without disclosing legal advice, but I don't know how helpful it'd be, because it is very fact intensive.
My layman's concept of a taking is preventing the owner from realizing, as you mentioned, economic gain from their property.
Or pleasure/use of. I think it's just the same sort of thing. You own a piece of property, and, we're basically saying, if you have trees on it, you can't do with it what you want. Or
And
it's
it-
going to
and it's
cost
not
you
that-
a lot more money to do what you want, whether it's a swimming pool or a shed or an open backyard or a bunch of houses.
And I would just add that, I mean, a taking doesn't prohibit those activities. It requires the government to pay for those things. So, which is just, it's not that it's unenforceable. It's just that if the town was to enforce it, it would be extremely expensive, because all of a sudden the town would be liable for all these EPODs across the town. So, I don't know. I could nerd out all day on takings, but...
No, I think you've covered truthfully what my question was for this group. Coming forward to summarize what I think is just requested, I can ask the town attorney for a definition of I would say regulatory taking in this situation and what's being considered. To make sure I have it correctly. What I would be going to the attorney also for is to ask, what are mitigation measures that can be incorporated into the draft code for woodland and steep slope EPODs? And I'm limiting it to that because it doesn't seem like anyone's uncomfortable with those other EPODs.
Yeah. I think because the DEC or other regulatory agencies have protections on those, so.
Okay. So additionally, on a separate note from this document, previously, this committee wrote a letter of support for the EPOD draft code as written. And that is part of the reason that this went to the town board as written. So the town board has been considering approval of it. So just so you are aware of that situation, clearly, my current expectation that I kind of put on Kevin is that you would go back to the town board at some point in the next month and acknowledge these conversations. And I would, as a staff member, also acknowledge that to the town supervisor, that there are still apparently some concerns with portions of the draft EPOD code as written.
And it
Is
was,
anyone in disagreement with that?
no, and I think the reason behind that could be that, we were paying a special attention to their comments, which spurred us to have further conversation,
Sure.
which truly what's happened.
I mean, I think previously when we reviewed it, I think we were happier because of the fact that it is less complex, it's definitely simpler to go through and understand, that I don't think we'd fully caught the nuances of what had been removed. And I apologize for that on our part as well. We should have really definitely captured that a little bit better than we did.
With that, is this committee comfortable with these responses being provided to the town board? I can additionally include a note that acknowledges that due to the comments that came in, the committee is further reviewing portions of the draft EPOD code.
That would be appreciated.
Okay.
Yeah, I suppose.
Okay.
We like them.
Does anyone not want these responses to go to the town board?
Do we actually have a choice with this being a public meeting? I mean, we've made our comments out loud.
Sure, but
It's
each
like-
town board member doesn't actually, I don't
Okay.
know, I don't know who watches what meeting. Like, I can't guarantee you that each town board member is going to watch this meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't
No, I
think that's fair
I
for
feel
me
like
to
it's a
guarantee.
piece of public record at this point in time, and whether or not you transcribe it and hand it to them or give it
It
to
is
them in
my
another
job to do
format.
that.
Yes, that it's done.
Yeah, okay,
We have had the conversations.
okay. Thank you.
Suggestions now?
Looking at the time.
Yes.
Matt and Cynette, would you be comfortable if I move town sustainability webpage updates up?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
we're going to do that next.
Okay.
If that's okay. That is mostly my information, so I'll just go on. We previously talked about some kind of campaign or a media campaign or something that the town and this committee could potentially do to inform residents of what actions the town is taking. At this point, it has been brought to our attention as staff members that the sustainability webpage on the website is just really behind. It's not up to date and not entirely factually correct anymore, with some changes that have been made in the past few years. I apologize for that being overlooked, because I'm definitely someone that has an effect on that and can have an effect on that. But because of that, we feel like that would be a really good first place to start. So internally, we are working to update that page. My ask of this committee and members of this committee is, if there are any items that you feel would be appropriate to be on that page, can you please email Matt and I? And if you want to do little write-ups or however you want to present it, or just give me bullet points, whatever you want to do in that regard would be wonderful. Please email Matt and I Please don't expect it to be exactly in your words, because I'm sure probably like 5 to 10 sets of eyes are going to end up looking at it. So the wording may change, but if you can provide anything like that, it'd be incredibly helpful for staff. And we feel like this would be the best start to that.
For sustainability, or you
To the
specifically?
sustainability page,
Okay.
yes.
So basically, anything environment, energy,
Yep.
Okay.
conservation related is eligible to go on that page.
Thank you.
So you are aware, if you are looking at this page, this webpage on your phone, it does not look like this. You have the sustainability section, which is that white section in the middle, and then you have a little hamburger menu, which is like 3 lines, that will bring you to the related pages on the side.
Got it.
Those related pages also can receive updates if you feel like there's value in that.
Yeah, when we did the Energy and Environmental Advisory Committee, this was a very active component for us, and I hadn't realized that it wasn't.
And truthfully, I had not either.
Yeah.
We previously had one specific staff member that reviewed this page every year.
It was a passion,
And
even.
yes, I mean, and she was incredible at it.
Yes.
She no longer is here. She retired and is living a wonderful life, but obviously does not do that now. And someone needs to pick up that slack. So I'm asking all of you to help us.
Can we add the passage of the public tree law?
That would be wonderful.
That was definitely one.
And the next step.
And the Arbor Day article, and, just like, there's a lot of things. There's the recent addition of charging area
There's
charger
like
plans,
4 to 5 years of
so much
information.
stuff that can go on here and should go on here. Yeah.
So I apologize that has not yet been updated. And like I said, I'm asking you as committee members to help with that. If you do nothing, we will still work on it.
Yes. We believe
But
this
if
would
you
go
can
a
help,
long
it would
way.
be wonderful.
At advising town, especially the younger generation, that Penfield is as progressive when it comes to environmental and energy resiliency as we keep saying we are.
Would that be a section where you would put down if a grant was received, or special,
Why not?
I think
Depends.
that's an option, yeah.
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 Success for community campaigns should go there, like there's just a lot of things that can go here.
With that, does anyone have any questions on that?
What's your timeline for updating it?
If you guys can get me anything in the next week or two, that'd be wonderful. I'd like to have it updated by the next meeting. So if you want to send anything in, that provides me time to include that. Otherwise, I think the next month is reasonable with what else I have on my docket.
Okay, given the amount of time, obviously, we need to table the renewable energy code to the next meeting. Are you okay with that? Because you're not going to be at the next meeting, do we?
I mean,
Matt's
I
good?
don't know if we really have a choice. I mean,
Matt-
I think we need to make some progress on renewable energy systems.
And Matt's as capable as I am.
Okay, excellent.
I try
I
to
know
be.
that.
You are.
I know that.
And
I-
if there's any questions, I truthfully would be surprised if you get through all of it at the next
Yeah.
meeting. So
Yeah.
if there's any formal questions that you need my answer or other staff answers, we'll provide them at the meeting after that. That's fine.
Quick question about timing on that. Is
Yeah.
not finalizing our review of that holding up any reviews of projects in any respect?
It could be. So right now, the town does not have any formal applications for commercial solar or land-mounted solar. Residents at this time can technically go through an appeals process to the solar moratorium with the town board if they have a project that they want to put through. But I can tell you there is at minimum one project in town that has had engineering work done separate from town staff, like someone is looking to have work done on their property and have a potential solar field put in. and that project is being delayed by not having a code that addresses it. So formally with the town, no. Behind the scenes, yeah. That's not to say that we have a longer meeting time. So I'm sorry about that. And I'm sorry because I know that's frustrating to that resident, and I know it's been frustrating to the company that they've been working with. We have, for that company, provided a letter and a copy of our solar moratorium so that they don't have to keep paying RG&E until they can actually move forward, because they have some upgrades with RG&E that are required for that project, and they have to pay for those. But if it's not going to move forward, obviously they don't want to invest that money into it. So we have at least provided that for them, and they've gotten a pause on those payments.
Understood. Yeah, I appreciate that update.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of lively conversation on that document and a lot of back and forth and comments, and it's been great. And I'm wondering if there's anything like, as those conversations happen, can we archive the conversation if we feel like our concerns have been addressed, so that when we meet again in a month, we can just really not look at those and move on to the next thing?
Yeah, I might ask that any of you, as you go through and continue to review, if you feel that your comments have been addressed, state that. And so then, or if you want, some revised changes, state that as well. I will say we did receive comments from our building department on the RES code. I'll incorporate those in, so then we can, track those comments from internal staff and continue to have that dialogue and continue making changes. I can also start accepting drafted changes as long as nobody else has had any comments on those, so that it gets a little bit more complete and not struck through. The thing is that, as we're going through and editing this Google Doc, all the previous versions are saved, so we can always go back. But I think at this point we're at a stage where we can kind of clean it up a little bit, and if we feel that there's any areas that need comment at that point. But yeah, there's a lot of redlining throughout it that I think we can clean up and close out some of those open conversations and comments. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And for clarity on your statement with the comments from the building department, will you be doing some formal updates as well with that? So for any comments that came in of a change needs to be made in this spot, or a building code, a building permit is required, will you include that update rather than the comment, or are you just going to include the comments? I just want clarity for this group. Does that make sense?
I guess I would try and do both. I don't see a point in
I just want to make sure.
Just leaving. I mean, obviously some of the comments require being addressed, same as some of the ones that have been made by committee members. So it won't be just putting the comments in. There will also be modifications made. Yeah. So
I just didn't want the committee to be surprised by any changes that would be coming in.
Right, yeah, they would be made as suggested changes or suggested modifications, so.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, so can we go ahead and buzz through a couple of, at least our upcoming events under the new business section?
The calendar.
So that we get that information out there?
So Matt is pulling up some information from the town calendar. If you're looking for the town calendar, go to penfield.org, scroll to the bottom, and you can get it on the bottom left-hand corner. You can even click into it to get more details. The first upcoming event is September 14th. That's the Municipal Household Hazardous Waste Collection. This is by appointment only. So if you're looking to attend and drop off household hazardous waste, please go to either the town website and click through to the Eco Park website, or go to the Eco Park website and sign up for an appointment. With that, on the town website, there's details of what is accepted and what's not, as well as on the Eco Park website. So that is September 13th.
No.
Sorry, September 14th, and appointments are accepted until September 13th,
right,
which is the day before.
Exactly.
And this is for Penfield and Webster residents, to be clear. We do this in conjunction with Webster each year, and it switches between Penfield and Webster for location. And this is a Penfield year. The next item is, I don't know if it's on that calendar.
No.
Garden-worthy native plants. This is a class that's being held at Penn Rec. If you would like to, you can sign up for that. That is September 19th.
Is it in the evening?
In the evening. Okay. Do you want to pull that up, or you want me to keep going?
Yeah, so events through Penn Rec are advertised through the brochure. So if you go to the Penn Rec website and go to current program brochure, then you'll find the current catalog of the brochure, and you can find details about any one of these events that we discussed tonight.
And you can also sign up for any applicable classes through that website.
Yeah,
as
so
well.
the click here to register link, you'll be able to register for any of these that require registration.
So the next one is the residential drop-off and recycling day, or days, which is September 27th and 28th. The second day, they will also be accepting,
Is that the
sorry,
shredding?
document
Yeah.
I was going to
document
say
shredding.
paper for shredding.
Confidential document shredding.
Okay.
Paper shredding. So again, you can go to the town website. That is not an appointment-only event, and that is for Penfield residents. You can go to the website for the details of what they do accept and what they do not accept. This will not be an electronics recycling event, but there are a number of other items that are included as accepted materials. And Matt has that up now. If you're at home, pause, and you can read it. So, continuing on, the next two are part of our community campaigns for clean energy communities in conjunction with Color Penfield Green. October 3rd is Clean Heat, Cool Savings, which is about essentially upgrading and or electrifying your home. And it is both educational in different ways you can improve your home in those manners, but also it gives some background from different residents that have gone through the process of installing heat pumps or geothermal, and even like an electric washer in their home. So it's a really great class. It is part of the clean heating and cooling community campaign. And with that, I will acknowledge both at this meeting, as we are working to do on our town website, that if you purchase a heat pump and you live in Penfield since 2021, you are part of like the eligibility for us to submit your purchase order or invoice to NYSERDA so that we can get grant funds for energy efficiency upgrades for the town. So if you are comfortable providing that for the town, and again, you have purchased a heat pump or a geothermal system in the town of Penfield for your home, your business, and you're comfortable sending your invoice, please feel free to send that to me at waterman@penfield.org. And I'm happy to work with you to sort out any materials that we need for that. And we would appreciate those submissions.
What is this class through? The October
Penn Rec.
3rd? Penn Rec?
Yep. After that, on October 17th and October 24th, this is a two-part class. EV 101, Your Guide to Electric Vehicles, is also part of these community campaigns. It's part of the electric vehicle community campaign. And with that, it is, again, education on electric vehicles, as well as personal experiences of purchasing and using electric vehicles. It will also be sharing some information, as well as the Clean Heating and Cooling Savings class, about different incentives for purchasing electric vehicles, and the other class for heat pumps through NYSERDA and New York State. With that, the EV one is part of this community campaign as well. If you have purchased an EV in the town of Penfield and live in the town of Penfield since 2021, then that would also qualify as a purchase for this campaign. The classes are part of it. You do not have to attend a class. If you are interested in any of this information, attend a class, email myself, and we are happy to share more information. That is upcoming events.
Okay, good. Is there any other upcoming events that somebody else is aware of that we have not captured?
There is one. It's going to be the afternoon before our next meeting, the day of, so October 10th. Healthy Yards Penfield is running Rethinking the American Lawn, and it's a deer program, a lunch and learn, part of the Lunch and Learn series. It's also in the PennRec catalog.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other new business that we have time for in the next 30 seconds?
Or that you'd like on the agenda.
Or that you'd
for the
like
next
on the
meeting.
next agenda?
New old business, we should be thinking about a next speaker and when that,
It was actually a plan,
yes,
because we thought we'd have a very light agenda next meeting.
Yeah.
But we've managed to pack our agenda once again. But
So for everyone's information, before we close the meeting, Matt and I internally are looking to have someone present at the meeting after we complete the
Res
Renewable
Code.
Energy Systems Code review. Obviously, between now and then, something crazy could come up and be on our docket, and we not have time for a presentation. But the goal is to have a presentation at the meeting after that is completed.
it's our little carrot, right? Get that done
Yes,
and you can
so,
have a presentation.
So that is something that we are considering.
Okay.
It hasn't just gone over our heads.
Yes.
No, I'm your little tickler file, so.
Yeah, we discussed it even, so.
We were
Okay.
hoping. Thank you. That's
At-
all I have.
At this moment, I believe that I need to go ahead and have a request for a motion to, oh, no, I don't have to
You
do that.
don't have to do
Never
that.
mind, I keep forgetting, I don't have to do that. So at this moment in time, I declare our meeting closed. It is 6:01 PM. So the September 12th meeting of the Environment and Energy Conservation Committee, get it right this time, is closed.